In order to be successful, a novel engine design must be clever. And a great way to embody cleverness is to use existing technologies and then rearrange them to achieve something that existing engines using the same technologies cannot. And that's exactly what the Heart Combustion Engine does. As you can see, it's made up of completely conventional parts. A conventional piston, 2 conventional crankshafts, and conventional connecting rods. A lot of conventional connecting rods, but with these completely conventional parts, it still manages to do some very amazing things. Why is it called the Heart engine? Honestly, I have absolutely no idea. It doesn't look like a heart. There's nothing in the inherent operation of the engine that suggests it sort of works like a heart or resembles a heart. I don't know. Maybe the inventors have a big heart. But the name isn't important. We don't analyze brand image on this channel. We analyze the engine, so let's analyze it to see what it can do. And let's start with the benefits, the good news. And to observe the benefits, we have to watch this engine complete a combustion cycle. So we have intake, compression, combustion, exhaust. Let's watch it again, a bit slower. Intake, compression, combustion, exhaust. So it does 4 strokes with the piston just like any of the billions of the 4 strokes out there. What's the big deal? Well, there is a big deal. Did you notice it? Did you notice how the Heart engine did intake, compression, combustion, and exhaust within just 1 revolution of the crankshaft? 360 degrees completes all the 4 strokes. A conventional 4-stroke cannot do this. It has to do 2 full rotations or 720 degrees of rotation to complete the 4 strokes. So in theory, the Heart engine is more power dense than a conventional 4-stroke because it fires more often within the same period of time. In fact, the Heart engine fires as often as a 2-stroke, but unlike a 2-stroke, it does not compress the air and fuel mixture below the piston, which means that it does not burn oil by design, and it can have everything below the piston rings fully and consistently lubricated by engine oil. So to sum it up, the Heart engine has the power density and the firing frequency of a 2-stroke, but the reliability and longevity of a 4-stroke. The next benefit is that, as you can see in the Heart Combustion Engine, the 4 strokes, they do not have the same length, whereas in a conventional 4-stroke, all the 4 strokes have the same physical length. This means that the Heart engine is actually a true Atkinson cycle engine, because we have the combustion stroke being longer than the compression stroke. Increasing the length of the combustion stroke improves engine efficiency noticeably because it gives the engine more time and space to harness the energy created by combustion, which means that there's less wasted energy escaping out the engine, out the exhaust as heat and noise. Now, many modern conventional engines, they can run in the Atkinson cycle by manipulating valve timing. However, this is a lesser form of the Atkinson cycle because the only thing that it does is that it reduces the effective duration of the compression stroke, and this is done by closing the intake valve later, which means that the cylinder stays unsealed longer, so the engine spends less time, there's less duration, less length, effective length to the compression stroke, and this improves efficiency because the engine doesn't waste as much energy on compressing the air and fuel mixture. But what this ultimately means is that valve timing induced Atkinson is only capable of improving efficiency at the expense of power and responsiveness because we spend less time compressing the air and fuel mixture, resulting in a weaker combustion. But what the Heart engine does is that it does not reduce the effective duration of the compression stroke. It increases the physical length of the combustion stroke in relation to the compression stroke. And the compression stroke can be whatever length we want. It can be designed to whatever length is desirable for the application. And that means that the Heart engine improves efficiency without sacrificing power and responsiveness. Another problem with valve timing-induced Atkinson is that we are ultimately limited in our range of adjustment. At some point, we start reducing the compression stroke too much and we start losing way too much power, or we simply run out of valve timing and we cannot adjust any further. On the other hand, the Heart Combustion Engine, with its interesting anatomy, complex anatomy, can be designed for any kind of stroke length difference that we want to see. So it can be optimized for anything from super efficient stationary engines and range extender engines to stuff like hybrid vehicles and combustion vehicles that need powerful and responsive but still very efficient engines. But wait, there's more. There are more benefits hidden in the funky anatomy of the Heart engine. And to observe them, we must take a closer look at the top rod, the one connected to the piston. Let's observe it during the intake stroke. As you can see, it sharply tilts. It assumes a very sharp angle during the intake stroke. As it does so, it pulls the piston down faster, which leads to higher piston velocity, and that leads to a higher intake air velocity, which promotes better cylinder filling, better volumetric efficiency, and of course better air-fuel mixing, which then leads to a higher combustion quality, which of course positively impacts both power and efficiency. Now let's observe the same rod during the combustion stroke. As you can see, it remains almost perfectly straight during pretty much the entire length of the combustion stroke. It tilts just a bit towards the end of the combustion stroke. And this is very good because it means that as the piston is receiving the brunt, all the might of the combustion pressure and the force, the rod is not angled. And because it's not angled, it's not trying to flip over and it's not pushing the piston into the cylinder wall. The fully straight rod actually reduces friction between the piston and the cylinder wall, which of course positively impacts again both power and efficiency, but also reduces cylinder wear. What's nice is that Heart Engine is not just a bunch of theory in CAD. There is a living, breathing, running prototype. And the footage of it running that I'm about to show you has been exclusively shared with me. I got in touch with Heart Engine while making the video, and they were willing to share footage of the engine running that they haven't published anywhere else. They haven't published it anywhere else, mostly because this is still a very early prototype. The footage they shot has been shot during the very early stages of development. The engine has not gone through fine-tuning, and they cannot really shoot new footage because the engine has already been dismantled again. It's getting upgraded again because Heart Engine has already patented another more advanced, more capable version of their design. All that being said, here's proof that the prototype does indeed run. But something on this prototype that I have noticed is extremely interesting. And if we zoom in a bit, we can see that they're using what appears to be an old discarded engine valve. And they're using it to be able to lock this shaft into different positions. It's done obviously manually. Now, the location of this shaft corresponds to this journal right here, and that's the journal upon which the intermediate rod rotates. So this shaft is likely positioned eccentrically on the journal, and that means that when we rotate the shaft, we are changing the relative position of the journal, and thus also, of course, the relative position of the intermediate rod in relation to all the other journals and rods. And that's very good and very important because changing the position of this intermediate rod also impacts all the other rods and ultimately changes the stroke lengths of the piston. Now, with a bit of imagination, we can remove our crazy discarded valve manual mechanism and replace it with, I don't know, a servo motor or some sort of hydraulic mechanism or whatever. And what we have just created is a variable stroke engine. We can change the stroke lengths of the piston on the fly while the engine is running. So, want even more efficiency? Sure. Want more power? No problem. Want to run on gasoline turbocharged? You got it. Want to run the same engine on diesel? No problem as well, because changing the lengths of the strokes, their relationship, also changes the effective compression ratio of the engine. So you can change the fuels too. It's pretty crazy, a very interesting benefit. What's kind of weird is that I did not find this explicitly mention the ability of the engine to do this, explicitly mention either on the patent of this engine or anywhere on the website. It's possible that I'm missing right now, that I'm not seeing some sort of obstacle to implementing this, but honestly, I think there's no reason why it couldn't be implemented, but it is definitely an extremely interesting potential benefit of this engine to have a variable compression ratio. Okay, let's sum up the benefits of the Heart Combustion Engine. It fires as often as a two-stroke, has the efficiency of an Atkinson, the reliability and longevity of a conventional four-stroke, while also having optimized rod angles for improved combustion quality and reduced cylinder wear. Very nice. That's the benefits. Now it's time for the more bleak part of the video, the drawbacks. What's interesting is that a couple of minutes ago I found out why it's called the Heart Combustion Engine. While shooting this video, I took a little break and watched a AI narrated, actually a pretty horrible AI narrated video on the Heart Combustion Engine YouTube channel. I don't know. I mean, this is the first impression somebody's going to get of your engine, and it doesn't really cost that much to hire an actual professional narrator or even just a voice actor, because this guy, it's really creeping me out. But he did explain why it's called the Heart Combustion Engine. I'll let him explain it.
The Heart Combustion Engine combines the vitality of a heart with advanced engineering efficiency.
Okay, now I think that the Heart engine is a pretty lame name. It has the vitality of a heart. I mean, come on. What I think a much better name for this engine is the Atkinson Reborn, the Atkinson engine revisited with modern technology, or, I don't know, Atkinson 2025 to keep it short and sweet, because this engine really shares its core idea and many of the benefits and drawbacks with the original Atkinson cycle engine. Here it is, the original Atkinson cycle engine, and as you can see, it too uses a complex multi-rod arrangement to achieve all four strokes within 360 degrees of engine rotation. And it too has an intake and compression stroke shorter than the combustion and exhaust stroke, just like the Heart engine. What's really funny is that the original Atkinson actually has features that look like a heart, and the Heart engine doesn't. Now, back in 1887, the original Atkinson cycle engine was known as an efficient, but also a fragile engine, mostly due to its complex rod anatomy. Of course, technology has come a very long way since the late 19th century, so today it is definitely possible to create a non-fragile multi-rod complex anatomy engine. That being said, this engine still has 2 cranks and 5 rods. And of course, casting or forging and then machining and balancing all of them is still more time-consuming and expensive than when you're working with just 1 crank and 1 rod. Also, 5 cranks and 5 rods, that's a lot of friction because we have bushings and journals and, all of that and bearings and stuff. There's friction, and friction is a parasitic loss. That being said, I don't think it's a major source of friction because pretty much everything is free moving and it should be well lubricated, so I think that the extended combustion stroke length more than makes up for it, and this should still be a pretty efficient engine even with all the moving parts. And here's a little benefit hidden in the drawback of the many moving parts. The 2 cranks, they're counter-rotating. They rotate in opposite directions, so they cancel the forces of each other out, and they can be set up to also fully cancel out the primary vibrations of the reciprocating piston, which means that we can achieve a perfect primary engine balance with just 1 cylinder and 2 cranks and 5 rods. The Heart engine is also unable to rev high. And I know what you're thinking, it's because of this flimsy, weak anatomy, isn't it? Just look at it, look how weak it looks, look at this intermediate rod. It has 2 free-floating ends and then it violently, tilts to the side. There's no way that this can survive high RPM, right? Well, believe it or not, the strength of the multi-rod anatomy is not the first barrier to high RPM. This engine fails to reach high RPM before it has to test the strength of its anatomy. And it fails to reach high RPM simply because there isn't enough time. Think about it. we are doing 4 strokes within just 1 engine revolution. That means that we have less time to complete each individual stroke. As we rev higher, that time window becomes even smaller until eventually the engine simply fails to complete the strokes fully. It fails to take in enough air. It fails to get all the exhaust gas out, and power falls off dramatically. 5,000 RPM for the Heart engine in terms of time per stroke is the same as 10,000 RPM for a conventional 4-stroke engine. The Heart engine does make up for it somewhat by firing on every revolution. And we also have the extended combustion stroke, which means that this is likely an engine capable of doing very strong torque, delivering almost peak torque very low in the rev range, which is also another thing that's good for efficiency, and it's also convenient because it means that the engine doesn't have to test the limits of its strength by trying to rev very high. But it also means that the Heart engine is not as power dense as a 2-stroke. It may fire as often as a 2-stroke, but a 2-stroke can fire every turn 60 degrees and rev very high. The Heart engine can only do one of those things. Another problem with this anatomy is that it does not scale well at all. It is very easy to scale a conventional anatomy into, let's say, a 4-cylinder engine. But here's what a 4-cylinder Heart combustion engine would look like. This is to mechanical engineering elegance what the Olive Garden is to Italian cuisine authenticity. And to top it all off, you get a non-flat engine block, deck, and cylinder head surface, which I'm pretty sure is the final boss from the nightmares of every gasket and sealant designer. So I can say with complete certainty that this particular 4-cylinder design is never getting mass-produced. And finally, I have to talk about reliability. Do I believe that this engine anatomy can be made strong and reliable? Yes, I do. Do I believe it's easy to do so? I most certainly do not. A very recent and very illustrative example of how difficult it is to make novel engine anatomies reliable is Nissan's variable compression ratio or VC turbo engine. Nissan is a giant OEM with all the R&D capacity you can imagine. They invested insane amounts of money into the R&D of this engine. They did hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of miles with dozens upon dozens of different test engines. They quadruple checked everything before going into production, and then after all of that engineering and effort and all of that money, they were forced to recall thousands upon thousands of these engines for main bearing failure. This shows really well why most large OEMs tend to stay away from novel engine anatomies. It's simply too risky. And it's too risky because it's extremely hard to develop and make reliable novel anatomies that can stand up to an incredible number of different real-life usage variables while still being on budget. So, is the Heart engine a clever engine? Yes, it is. It seems to be heavily inspired by the original Atkinson cycle engine, but it still manages to push the envelope further to achieve more, to do more, so I think it's an interesting design. Would I like to see one running and even mass-produced? Definitely. But as an engineering and mechanical engineering and engine enthusiast, I want to see everything running and mass-produced, so I'm not relevant. What are the objective, realistic chances of this getting mass-produced? I think they're pretty low, because this engine is obviously intended for the personal transportation market, i.e. cars, and right now that is not the market where investments are being made and risks taken in favor of novel engine anatomies. Where that is happening right now is the drone market. Things are kind of crazy over there. All sorts of things are being tried. A lot of money is being thrown at novel engines. Sadly, most of it is military, fully confidential, so we can just see little bits, stuff that gets into the civilian part, which is kind of sad because there's fun stuff going on there. The catch is that a drone wants the simplest, smallest, lightest, cheapest possible engine that delivers the maximum performance. And the Heart engine, it's, as you can see, kind of big. It's kind of heavy, 2 cranks, 5 rods. It's kind of complex, probably kind of expensive. In exchange, we do get increased efficiency, probably even better power density, possibly very good reliability if done right, but none of these things really matter for a drone, because a drone, unlike a car, doesn't tolerate an increase in mass and size and all of that. Even as a range extender, this engine is not ideal because kind of big, kind of heavy, and a battery-powered vehicle is already kind of big, kind of heavy, so adding even more big and heavy in there, not really desirable. All that being said, never say never, and even if it never gets mass-produced, it doesn't really matter because it's still a very fun and very inspirational learning experience. So, as always, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon with more fun and useful stuff on the Day4A channel.